A very good evening. You're joining us with yet another face-to-face where we dive deeper into Sri Lanka's political arena. And today we have the Colombo mayoral candidate of the National People's Power, Vraie Balthazaar, with us. Hello, Vraie. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Mariam, for having us.
Well, we're just a week from the local government election. Next week, this time, it will be all set for the election. The country would be so hyped. People would be sure of who they are voting for in this particular election. And we have potentially Colombo's next mayor sitting with us right here. So, Vraie, tell us, how are you feeling? How's everything going? Is everything is all set for you all?
Yeah, Mariam, actually, it's been quite a run for us. I think every time I come here and I sit in on any of the any interview, in particular on face to face, it's always during an election, and this is our third election in the last 6 months, right? So it feels like, in particular for those of us who are running for local government, like it's been just back to back. Like we've been working at this for a very long time, because it's almost like an extension. We had the presidential, then we had the general election, and there wasn't too much of like a grace period between that last election and this. So in many ways, we've not really at any point in time, and prior to those two elections also, we've really been on the ground. So there's no disengagement and then having to come out like I suppose other parties would, to have to really campaign. For us, it's just kind of accelerating some of those processes, and just ensuring that we do get people together and organize people so that we can share this message. But there's been a lot of campaigning, there's been a lot of work, a lot of engagement, and we're as ready as we can be. We have an incredibly able team running from the 47 wards in the city. So for us, I think we're good, I think we're ready, and I think the people of the city are also ready.
Of course, and as you mentioned, we've been in back-to-back election season, and y'all have been working continuously for the presidential election, the general election, and now the local government election. On the one hand, we see people who say, if the National People's Power very easily won the presidential election and the general election, then victory for the local government election seems, it's an easy run. But then at the same time, there are some people who say that it's completely different. The local government election is nothing like the general or presidential elections, because we see people who come down, they fly down to Sri Lanka just to cast their vote for the presidential election and general elections. But it doesn't quite seem to be the case for the local government election, because this is directly grassroots level. What is your stance, Vraie?
Sure. So there is a huge fervor with, I think, in particular, even in the last two election cycles for presidential, you saw people really canvassing in different countries, coming together, booking flights, coming down, voting, and that becomes almost like a start to how you want things to follow, right? And I think that was why there was so much interest. Like we wanted the first step right. And then you had also a massive amount of interest for the general election, because you could visibly see the kinds of people's representatives that you didn't want. What's interesting about this particular election is that we haven't had a local government people's representatives actively engaging for over 3 years. This is an election that should have taken place a long time ago. It was then gazetted dragged out for another year, and then we did run in 2023. I was then also the mayoral candidate for the city, and it took another, and now it's taken another 2 years. So in many ways, people haven't engaged with local government, people's representatives, since it was for about 3 years. But the last time we had an election was 2018. So I feel like the way in which people vote also is essentially different, because it's local government and because it's someone that you're technically supposed to know, who's able to deal with your problems on the ground in the space or in the division that you run from. Generally, you also vote for people that you know, relatives, family, friends, someone who used to play cricket with you down the road. The reason and the rationale for voting is very different as to that of a general election, right? And I think for us, it's been very important to go out and remind people that this is also a very important place where you're not just voting for, like you did previously, for friends or for people you thought were just nice folk or good people or just based on feeling, but to really come back, look at the people you're voting for, look at the team that is in place, ask if they are able to manage this daunting task of taking forward your council, whatever the council may be, and really bring it back to that. So the way in which people, Mariam, usually engage at local government is very different, and it's not the same. And I think, as you pointed out, there have been 3 elections, and I also said there is an election fatigue. So people may also feel like it's a lot of election, and we've already voted for 2, and maybe this one is, for a lack of a better way of saying it, may not be as sexy an election, right? So I think that is something that we have to encourage people to change. This is a place where decisions about where you live, your streets, your community will be made, and you need strong policymakers, you need strong people's representatives in those areas. And so this is not to be taken lightly, it is to be taken extremely importantly. And I hope that this is a message that we can give people. Go out and vote on the 6th.
But I think there is also another side to this. Like you said, since it's grassroots, because it's a local government election, people vote for people they know. Unlike other political parties, I think the National People's Power has this advantage of being with the people for quite a long time before this election. Right, like the word you'll always use, sahodara. A lot of people representing the National People's Power, they've been so close to the farmers, to the people, the daily wage earners. They've been there, and now they're coming up to kind of like represent the people. So don't you think that is an advantage that the National People's Power has?
Sure, no, I certainly think it's an advantage because, and I've said this previously also in interviews, and I've been really reflecting on it, the fact that in 2023 we put together a list to run for local government election, despite the election not happening, at the time I think a lot of us were new to the responsibilities that we were given, despite having been in the political space or community leaders for a while. But we have now grown into those roles as the representatives that I think the city deserves, and the representatives that we have aspired to want. And I think that is something so powerful. We had so many young people on the list who've now over the last 2 years really taken on that responsibility. So this time when their name appeared again on our list, on our nomination list, it made absolute sense because they've been on the ground, working very close, as you said, Mariam, very close to the people of the city. And we've also, we've over the years talked about how important it was for us to build these people's councils or Kotasha Sabhas or Kanta Sabhas or women's councils. It was so important for us to build it because we really did also want to engage with these folk and build leaders from those spaces. So in fact, when we were looking for nominations this time, it wasn't very difficult, it wasn't a stretch. We weren't in the dark kind of grappling to try to interview folk or to call out for applications, because we had our team ready. We've been prepared for this. The second the general election ended, we knew this is what we were preparing for. And these are people who, as you said, quite rightly said, we were engaging with people on the ground in very different capacities, with the business folk, with people from the low-income settlements. Colombo is a very diverse place, so it requires for people to engage in different spaces. And I think we've really tried, and we keep trying, and we are always open to engaging more and more. But it's not a completely new thing for us. Like I said, it's not like we're going into this as just because it's an election, just going out and reaching out and saying, give us your vote. We've been doing the work already for a very long time, already engaging, already trying to resolve people's issues well prior to having a place of power, I think. And I think people see that, and they appreciate that. They understand that we are open to resolving people's problems through our public days, even when we didn't have, even when we're not in a place where we have power to resolve some things. I think we're always looking to find the best solution for these people. So I think it's been a very, 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 very important journey for us. And the people, I think the citizens of this country can definitely see that we have that relationship. And that's something we want to take forward.
Right, of course. And I think another thing that we must definitely touch on is Colombo city has two sides to it. We have the Vathas, we have the Colombo city itself. And I think when people vote for other elections, it's the bigger picture. It's, you know, it's the economy, it's how the country works with other countries, it's, you know, the global side of it. But when it comes to local government election or something like, you know, the Pradesh Sabhas, the municipal councils, the urban councils, it's more, you know, my garbage issue, the construction issue, the road down, you know, my lane. That's how people think. And how is the what is the National People's Power going to do about this? Do you all have a plan in mind? What exactly are you all, you know, envisioning for the next 5 years?
Sure. So just just a couple of points. One is that we understand that city is extremely diverse in terms of ethnicity, race, religion. You have all these like really massive, you have a range of the different kinds of people, which actually make the city a really interesting place to live in. But you also have the divides of those who have and those who don't. And I think in a city like Colombo, where I think the expectation is that you have a city that is, you know, I think in the past people have attempted to brand Colombo as a world-class city and so on, right? So you have all these visions of what the city could have been, but in this configuration of it, you have people who live in low-income settlements with less than quarter perch land, who are not allowed the dignity that they should within the city. So who has the right to the city is always a question. In fact, in the research work that I've done in the last 7 years also, we've really reflected on who does the city belong to.
So who does it belong to?
I think it belongs to everyone. And I think this is why in particular, you know, there are over 600,000 residents in the city. There are 100,000 who commute, a million who commute daily to the city. You have tourists who visit the city who don't necessarily want to retain, like the city is unable to retain them for a very long time. It's usually for a short stay. But you have people who have histories, generations, 100, 200, 300-year generational histories of the city. But a lot of what the city means to, I think, the optics of the city is often, it's always configured to be or interpreted to be a place where only the wealthy can stay. And I think thereby we erase the lives of so many people who have every right to belong in the city, and it is in fact their hard work that is able to make a city like Colombo run. So how do we make a city then, Mariam, that works for everybody? All of us are taxpayers, all of us pay our rates. How do we make a city of joy and dignity and prosperity for everyone? So what kind of plan do we have? The question you asked. I think for us, we've been looking at the city for many years. Not in that the way in which I think leaders of the past have looked at the city, but to look at the city with fresh eyes, to look at the macro and the micro. And in order to do this, you can't do this in the rush of an election. It doesn't work. We've done that before, it doesn't work. So the last 2 years, Mariam, we've looked at people, we've had conversations, literally hundreds of conversations with people who've been formally in the CMC, people who have been in kind of looking at urban spaces, researchers, people who've looked at architects, who've looked at, you know, cities and how to redesign cities, reading in on history, on what people in the Patrick Geddes wanted to do in the 1930s with the city, how, you know, in the 1970s and the 80s, how the city was, you know, and then very recently in 2010 with the Urban Regeneration Project and the UDA, what the city wanted to do. So many conversations. This is not a new subject for us. And I think people who are voting for us need to understand this. We've had these discussions, and we also understand that a lot of the problems in the city, you quite rightly mentioned garbage and so on. These are not problems, traffic also, are not problems that can be resolved only within the city. Sometimes we would need support from the other local
Suburbs.
Government entities within the Colombo district, and in some instances even within the province. So what does that mean for us? We've had discussions on what we want to do, and I think we've now formulated fairly, I mean, I think for anyone who's meeting us, anyone who's getting our leaflets, there's a fairly short, concise plan of what we want to do for the city. But I think what our larger plans are, as we roll out in the next few months, hopefully people will give us the chance to be able to share our larger plans. But I think we have a concise version that covers the basics of ensuring that everyone in the city has an efficient, we want an efficient system. I think that is the most important thing. You want an efficient system, a system that works for you, a system that isn't wasting your time, a system that cares for you, a municipal council that can resolve problems, not hold on to letters for 10 years, which is really sometimes very difficult to have to go back to, and also address the smaller problems while looking at the bigger picture. So this is the plan that we have. I know that sounds, that's not specific, but we're happy to talk about specifics also.
Of course. I recently saw this public meeting that you had spoken where you mentioned that the budget for Colombo is 30 billion, and you specifically mentioned not 30 million, it's 30 billion. And you just mentioned a long list of things that the NPP would like to do for the city itself. Are you saying that none of it is happening? Where do you think corruption kicks in? What exactly is going wrong right now, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot that I think the folk of the city who might be sitting watching this interview know very well where things have gone wrong. In that it has been very much like national level politics, local government politics, and also because Colombo, there is a budget of 30 billion. It is a massive budget and has increased over the years. This is for 2025. That is not a small number. It is more than what you'd have in most ministries, and it's a lot for us to work with, right? So how have people in the city not benefited from the monies? I mean, it's not always been 30 billion, but it's always been substantial. It is the highest budget that any local government entity would have in the country, right? So how have we not benefited? And it really has been about corruption, really has been about things not streaming down to people. And there are two ways in which that doesn't happen. One is through public officials and one is through government officials, right? So you have public representatives who are there, who are in it, simply because there are tenders, there's a lot of commission that they make from it.
Yeah.
And that is also a huge reason why they clamor to get back in, right?
Yes. Let me quickly interrupt you because
Sure.
this is something that people say. There are certain people who, really want, even people who did not vote for the National People's Power in the previous elections, they say, we want to give them a chance, but even if they do their job right, it's the public officials that might, there might be hiccups there. So how can you all fix everything?
Sure. I will be very honest and tell you that is the biggest challenge, right? And I think that is something that you can see with the government already.
Yes.
Intentions are in place. We have the willpower to do so. But there is and this is not to say all public servants or all government servants are to be mistrusted. We had a huge support. In fact, I think a lot of the information we receive about the corruption comes from within. It is not from the outside, right? All the files that we receive, all these conversations that we are privy to is because of people on the inside. We have good folk on the inside who understand that in order to for them also to exist in this city or in this society, in this country, that you need to have places that are non-corrupt. That this is something that we must eliminate. So this is not to say that it's everyone, but it is to say that there are certainly a few people within the system that really make it very hard. But I think we need then to be able to put our foot down, to be able to ensure that we have better checks and balances in place. That we are also hoping there are certain systems that can change, administrative systems that can change, to ensure that there's least possible corruption, right? Which means some things would have to be digitized, some things would need a little more, perhaps to find different ways of running the system, of having better people in place in order to manage those systems. And I think these are the different kinds of way in which you're going to have to tackle the problem of public officials who may be corrupt. And this is again not to say that everyone is, but there certainly are. And I think if there's any kind of friction against us, Mariam, it is definitely those folk, because this is their life. They've done this for so many years. This is how they've built their homes, sent their kids to school. This is their retirement and pension plan, and we are putting a spoke in that wheel and saying, no, you can't keep doing this. This is not fair by the people of the city. Is it going to be a challenge? The answer is absolutely yes, but we're committed to do so. We have a will. We have the political will to want to change that, and we understand that has to be addressed, and it's not going to be easy, but we're going to do it.
And, you said that it is sometimes those within that come out and tell you that, this is what went wrong. Here are the files, take action. We want, stability in the country. We want the right thing being done. Is this new? Is this been happening since you all came into power? Or has this been happening since, the previous governments have been in power?
No, I think, to be very honest, people haven't been able to have that kind of conversation with the politicians that previously represented them, because those politicians also engage in the exact same system. So that made no sense to go from one thief to another, or to complain about one wrong to another wrong. Right?
So it's a realization.
So, a lot of the information we were getting came well before we were in power. And I think in the run up to it, when people understood there's going to be a shift, then came the problems. And I think I'm going to share this story because as soon as Harini became Prime Minister, this was as soon as she was made Prime Minister, prior to the general election in that interim.
Yes.
I was supporting her for just a couple of days until we had a team in place. And I had her phone with me, and we received a phone call literally 2 minutes after she had just taken notes, saying, we have problems like this. Who is going to support us? Who is going to help us? It was immediate. And therein, I thought at that moment that, therein lies people's urgency to have things fixed immediately. It was even before the news came out. It was immediate. People want solutions, right? And they want to engage. But there's a huge backlog of that coming in. I think that's something you'll notice that in the last 5-6 months, certainly things have settled on some level. It doesn't mean that all is well. I think we're still many months away from being able to do that. I think a lot of, on national level, a lot of the problems that are being now taken to parliamentarians will now seep down into local government. And once we have a better system in place here, it makes for easier transition for everyone. Not just us as a political party or local government entities, but also for the people, because problems will get resolved much faster. Then people don't necessarily understand, Mariam, how local government necessarily works, right? Everything in the city, if something is broken, people assume everything is the CMC, right?
Yeah.
And this is also new for, I think, a lot of folk who don't understand that even within the city of Colombo, you will have main roads that are divided. You'll have one to the CMC, another one to the RDA. You will have something like the Beira Lake, which will need, you will have the UDA, you will have the CMC, you will have the Ports Authority, and all of these different entities in charge of all of these things. So it is not only the CMC, you have all these different entities. But I'm just going to add on to that. I know this is a little going off track from the question you asked, but
sure.
For me, I think one of the strengths that the NPP has is we do have power, right? And we do have 159 in Parliament. The ministers are predominant. All are of the NPP. And for us, as we go into the CMC, for us to resolve a lot of our problems means that we would need to work with the government in order to resolve our problems on housing, on waterways, because of the complexities of the city. And I think we have a unique opportunity because we are not a fragmented party. We're a team, right? So to be able to come and sit together at the table as a team, as those of us from the local government, as ministers who represent in different ministries, and to say, okay, these are our problems. This is what we need. What is the solution you can give us? Minus the traditional political kind of game playing from different parties, or even from sometimes within the party, but different egos, right? And I think that's something that we don't have. This makes me very hopeful about transforming the city, because it is often the lack of political will that has also brought us here, not just only the corruption. Sometimes there are very, very well-meaning people over the last so many decades who've gone in, but they haven't had the bandwidth, or they haven't had the space to be able to bring everyone together. That is something only the NPP can do, right? And that is something that we can also offer.
Right. I have a question about the central government on the top of my head, but
Sure.
Before I show that question to you, we have to cross to a short commercial break. So stay with us. We will be right back.
Newsfirst, face to face with Mariam Gunvujaya.
ජනප්‍රිය ගායන හා වාදන ශිල්පී මාක් පීරිස් ගයන ලුණු දෙහි ගීතයක් Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube ඇතුළු ඔබගේ ප්‍රියතම සංගීත සේවාවන් හරහා රසවිඳින්න.
Entertainments.
ඔබේ ගමේ නගරේ දේශපාලනයේ හෙට දවස සතිය දිනවල සවසහයි දෙකට.
If you do not perform, or if you have not performed, and if you do not perform, this is a protest vote we are going to place, and that signal, that protest vote will go down very well, because the government will know that their popularity is coming down and they will have to arrest him.
This government needs checks and balances.
You can't say only winning parties announce their candidates. There have been it has been time and time again where, candidates are chosen.
Our police is still being restructured and reformed at the moment, and that is part of the reason. But I also think organized crime is a bit unsettled at the moment.
Face the Nation every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m.
ජනප්‍රිය ගායන හා වාදන ශිල්පී මාක් පීරිස් ගයන ලුණු දෙහි ගීතයක් Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube ඇතුළු ඔබගේ ප්‍රියතම සංගීත සේවාවන් හරහා රසවිඳින්න.
Entertainments.
Newsfirst, face to face with Mariam Gunvujaya.
Welcome back. We are in conversation with the National People's Power's Colombo mayoral candidate Vraie Balthazaar. We are talking about the local government election that we are leading up to, and of course everything else that Vraie is currently doing for the country, for the government, as she represents the National People's Power. So Vraie, we were talking about budgets, we were talking about public authorities, and the grassroots level just before we crossed over to the commercial break. So my question to you is, you said you're a very you're a team, you're intact with the government, and you'll work together with the government. How would you say your relationship with the central government is? How would your decisions be made? Would it be independent? How exactly are you planning on doing that for the CMC?
I think for us, a lot of the work that we have to do, we understand, and we understood well before we came into power, have to be cohesive. They have to, the conversations that we need to have about how we want to rebuild our city has to be streamlined all the way from the top. There are things that we understand that are true for only the city, but in order to have the support, I think you need all these different tiers to be able to engage. So for instance, if I were to use an example, the question on garbage, right, which is one of the most difficult issues for the city, is not something that the city alone can resolve, right? Because the city alone doesn't have the capacity to be able to take care of it, because also space, and we need to work with other local government entities in the district, but also in the province, right? So I know, for instance, we have the Waste Management Authority, which is now looking at bringing down, and I think we passed the budget for more compactors for the city. We're also looking at RDF project, which is basically energy to fuel project that looks at reusing plastic and converting that into energy, right, in a very simplistic form. And I think about 500 million has been set aside for this. But the reason I'm kind of using this is we are now privy to that information as those politicians running for local government for the CMC. And this is information that we need in order to be able to respond to people's questions, right? So I think for us, we will always need to have a cohesive system and a table that we can sit together and discuss our plans for not just a city but for the country.
Yes, but while you were speaking, I just remembered the opposition has been raising concerns since recently, saying that President Anil Kumar Dissanayake said that when allocating funds, apparently the opposition wouldn't be getting. It's always the NPP representatives that will be getting, and then of course the president reacted saying that the central government is now clean because we have been working so hard and we don't steal. So why should the Pradesh Sabha steal? We make sure that we are working hard for the country, so why should the Pradesh Sabha do so? And it's always attack from this side and then another attack from the other side. So
yeah, I liked that question simply because I really liked that conversation. What the president said in many ways was, when the government is trying so hard to save, when the government is trying so hard to ensure that there's no corruption, and we are very particular on our spending. We've been as as empathetic and thoughtful as possible, and really put people forward and put people first in our budget, right? Looking at all the different kinds of things that we can do for people. We've increased increased wages for public officials. All of these things that we've been able to do, and for us, it's very important then that also gets streamlined down to local government. So what he said on stage was very simple. We know that if it's a NPP local government entity, that there is going to be no corruption, because we understand that this system is what we want to take forward. But we can't be sure of everyone else. And he didn't say we won't give. He said we'll have to think about it many, many times and really evaluate it before we pass this. And then, of course, the opposition responded by saying, that means you're not going to give us money. And as he quite rightly said it, if the cap fits, put it on, right? If you're saying, we are saying we're not going to give it to thieves. If you're saying, if you're then saying if we are not getting the money, then you're saying if A equals B and B equals C, you're saying you're a thief, then that's what it is. But I think the point he was making was really, really important for us. The government is trying very hard to keep it together, to ensure that there's no corruption. And we need the same system at the bottom in order for the plan to flow from top to bottom. It's not going to work if you have, after all of the vision, the mandate that people gave us, if we're going to replicate the old system again in local government, it's not going to serve the people. So I think it's a valid point. But there certainly is a lot of media and conversation around it.
Let me take a second and be the devil's advocate here and say,
sure.
What if one of the opposition political parties end up, taking over victory here in Colombo? What would that mean? How do you see it? Has the government had quite the conversation about it?
I think for us, we're looking at a victory, right? We're not looking at it any other way. We know that the people of the city...
You're certain?
We are certain, because we also did win a general election. We're not trying to say that because we won the general election, this is an automatic given thing for us. I don't think it's that. There will be challenges, in particular with the city. But this is why we're working very hard and engaging with as many people as we can to reassure them that we have an extremely capable team. And this is really the only choice in many ways, that a team that is not corrupt, a team that has a political will. There isn't any other party in the city that does that. There isn't any other party in any part of the country, but certainly I can speak for the city. We are the ones who've been engaging on the ground. We are the ones who've been working. Our work is visible. You can see that what we've done, at a local government level, certainly there are things that we haven't been able to do because we haven't had power. We don't have local government representatives. It is run by a commissioner, right? The council. But you can see that we've been actively trying to resolve problems in whatever ways we can, engaging. And you also see what is happening in Parliament. And I think that's really important, because quite often you have people who, or at least the opposition, trying to pitch against us and saying, well, you haven't done what you've promised. But I think we certainly have. and we've really worked hard at like I said, even with our last budget, I think it's very reflective of the work that we have, of what we've promised to do, right? And again, this is not to say that everything has changed overnight. We've inherited a very weak, broken system that we are fixing, and that will take time. I use this example of a house, that we wanted this house, and everyone kind of, I use it as an example in our meetings, that everyone wants, within a village, everyone wants this house. And we say, give us this house, we will make it better. But once we get there, we realize there's no roof, there's no windows, everything's been completely fallen apart. But now we have the house, and we've promised to protect the people within it. I know it's a very simplistic story, but I think for us it holds true. We want to ensure that the people within that home, or within this country, within this city, are safe. And we're doing it in the midst of complete collapse. But we've been able to, I think, stabilize the economy. Does that mean we're 100% A-okay? The answer is no, and I think people of the city, people of the country understand that. But the way in which we are able to engage in our businesses, a way in which we are able to now, minus the corruption, really see through certain projects, look at how we can take things forward. I think this is, and completely changing around political culture. We say Deshapalana Sanskriti, we've completely changed it. You don't have that same nepotistic, you don't have that same kind of corrupt, fraudulent system that was very much a part of how we understood politics for years. You don't have ministers using their privilege, and instead you have just, you have what we would call people's representatives who are really trying to do their job. And I think this is really, really important for people to understand.
While we speak about the very, obvious, I think, terms when we speak about politics, when we speak about people's representatives, when we speak about the government of the country as a whole, we talk about corruption, we talk about the economy, we talk about crime. Those are the things that come to the top of people's head. And like you said, the National People's Power did something to change the culture, the political culture in the country. And one such thing, we very recently had this conversation also, is Clean Sri Lanka. And, for a moment, the people were like, there's so much going on in the country, and what are they doing? Just cleaning the streets. And then they're like, okay, what's the point of this? What's the end goal? Because we saw you engage in it a lot. So what actually is the end goal?
Sure. I think the end goal is really changing people's mindsets towards everything that needs to be cleaned out. Not just, and I use this term superficially, but certainly we do need to clean. There are roads, there are drains, there are sewage lines. All of this needs to be cleaned, and we are on board with it. We understand that it has to be. But I think, in the recent past, the word came up again, Clean Sri Lanka, with the Dalda Maligawa and the kind of garbage that surrounded it. Therein lies the real problem. People's mindsets, not just with physical garbage, but about how the ownership of space, about how empathetic they are towards other people, right? It is, I think, a really good example, and I think the government has dealt with it, and I think we very, very quickly saw kind of recovery. And of course, you see images that would be shared on social media, and then that becomes a story. But I think one is the government resolved it, but at the same time, it speaks of the kinds of changes that we need, which is basically how to change people's mindsets about how they engage with the environment, how they engage socially with other things, with other people. And I think this is our end goal, is to really, we're not trying to, I've been saying this during our meetings also, we're not just trying to change local government entities, we're trying to change a society, right? And to change a local government entity, handing over power from one place to another, that is one goal. But within that, we are looking at how to change people's lives, society, mindsets, educate people. And I think that's the end goal. That's huge. And that is something that, is not superficial. That is something that needs a lot of time, is something that needs for structurally within our education system. It needs for the governments to accept this, for our policies to evolve and change. And I think it's a much larger thing. And as it was pitched, as Clean Sri Lanka was pitched, it was meant to be this really wide spectrum. It wasn't meant to be just cleaning beaches or cleaning streets. It was meant to be something that can evolve and become something much bigger. And I think a lot of what we've done for the city, or our policies for the city also, are based on the kind of, the base is very much Clean Sri Lanka, where we're looking at building a better environment, an environment in the sense not just trees and physical spaces, but also the environment that requires for people to live with dignity, with joy, with happiness. And I think these are very important things. So Clean Sri Lanka, I think, can evolve into being more and more things. People need to own it and figure out also what they want from it. And so it truly has the potential to evolve, as all good ideas should.
But now that you all have been engaging in it and doing it for some time, based on the reaction and how well it has gone, how realistic and practical do you think it is for Sri Lanka to actually change the people's mindset?
I think people wanted that change and have taken a step in that direction. And I think an election and the results of the election, 2 elections, have already been reflective of that. I think the third will enforce that one more time. But we have a long way ahead. There is no saying, everyone has voted and now governments have changed and now the world is a better place and Colombo city, everyone in the city has changed. No, but I think there is now a change in people's mindsets about how they want to engage with the politician or with the political camp. I think that mindset, people understanding ownership, people understanding the power of the citizen, is perhaps one of the most powerful things that happened post Aragalaya. And I think we need to revisit that, right? But post Aragalaya, with people realizing that change is necessary. And then once you have that first step, and then you have a government that understands that and can mobilize that, can organize that to take the second step or the third step, that's where it happens. Is it going to be easy? Again, I come back to this. It's not going to be easy. But I think that's where government policy comes into place. That's where education and awareness comes into place. And I think that's our job now. That's our job.
Let me rephrase. As a government representative, do you think it's realistic and practical for a Sri Lankan or for Sri Lankans to change their mindset into what you're expecting?
I think it has to be done. The answer is yes. It is difficult, but it is absolutely necessary. There's no way ahead.
And do you think the NPP government is capable of doing that?
We are absolutely capable.
Okay.
I mean, we are the only party that has the willpower and the ability to do so. So there's absolutely no question about it.
Right. Okay. So let me quickly drift away a little bit away from corruption and away from these issues and talk to you about this particular aspect. Entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka. And I think Colombo is a place where a lot of, small businesses evolve from. And I think you are someone who knows a lot about it as, especially with women, right? The women in Colombo, they are the ones who don't really think, I'm not speaking for one particular place, but, you see it in them a little bit more than everyone else, I shouldn't just be only a housewife. I don't belong only in the kitchen. I can go out there. I can balance two at the same time. I can do this and I can do that. I think I can start like a little business and go with. Even like the youth in Colombo. I know I'm talking about a very big, but that's how it is. And I think these small scale businesses in Colombo is a big thing. And the first person they usually approach is the mayor to, kind of like, support or help or, guide me. So how is the government kind of trying to work that through?
I think on many levels, this is through the Ministry of Industries. This is something that they are looking at through the Ministry of Women and Children, in particular with the women again of the city, trying to empower and engage with women and ensuring that they can do their businesses. So how does the CMC or how will local government support women? I think for us, we also need to take one more step back, not just in how we build spaces for entrepreneurs. They don't automatically happen, right? You need to have a home and a family that in many ways is secure for you to be able to do what you do as businesses. So for a lot of low income families in the city, and for just anyone in general, sending your child to preschool is very expensive. A good daycare system is very expensive. Having facilities, good facilities for your family is almost non-existent, right? And these are all things that within that 30 billion budget, that's within the purview of the council to have good daycares. I know it looks like I'm digressing, but I'm certainly coming back to the answer, in that we need to have systems and structures in place that can support women with the work that they do within their home, because that is culturally, women are bound to a lot of that, in order for them to be able to also become successful business women, not just starting a business and running it in a very small way, but in order for them to grow, they need to be supported. And supported means looking at their lives and and then also their livelihoods, right? So as a council, there are certainly things that we can offer. I think we need to build better infrastructure, and this is something that we've always said. So things like daycare, in particular with childcare, those are things that we're looking at. Also in terms of entrepreneurship, I think because the government already has so many plans in place for entrepreneurs of the city, this is something of the country rather, this is something then that we work within the city, and because of those connections we are able to then share that information, I think, with women of the city. And I think that also becomes a responsibility through our divisional secretariats, through all of these other entities also take that out, so that the onus of creating an entrepreneur isn't necessarily in one entity, but it's a shared platform, but also ensuring that we create physical spaces for women to be able to do what they do. I know that we've been looking through this through our own kind of interest. If we were to come into power, just as an example, there are a lot of community halls that are now derelict, falling apart. We want to make them useful to the people of the city, right? So we've been visiting quite a few and wondering, if we were to come into power, when we come into power, how do we change this? And I think to be able to use some of those spaces as community spaces for women, for women's businesses, where they will have ownership during daytime, where their children can play in the garden, where they can use this as a business space to manufacture certain things during daytime, and then it can be used for different things at night that will serve the community in different ways. And I think we're just looking at spaces and people in a very much more cohesive way. So within that, then the entrepreneur, you said youth, and I just want to again say these are not things that automatically happen. The youth in Colombo, you have again, we are from Colombo city, but you know, we have a lot of parents coming off, and also young boys and girls coming and saying, apita rasawa korada na, give us a job, right? And they'll give us a CV, then we'll ask them, do you have knowledge of language skill? Many of them won't have English language skills. They won't have any kind of computer literacy. These are also within the purview of the local, our local government entity. As a CMC, we can have vocational training institutes. We can have I mean, there are those already in place, but we can increase the number, we can increase the capacity, we can increase the number, the volume in which we do things, we can increase the quality of the courses that we do within these spaces to really encourage these the youth of the city to be more engaged and push them in that direction where they can decide, once they're done with the course and it's free of charge, yes, this is something that I would like to do. Yes, I would like to start my own business. Yes, I have this computer skill. Yes, I can manage to do this. It's ever evolving, right? We can do, possibilities are endless. And I think we just need to build that basic system of being able to engage with the youth, with women, in order, because this is generally the group that has the least, Mariam, you pointed out the group that has the least amount of support, right? And so as a CMC, we have the incredible opportunity to have that system in place, to build that platform so that they can work up from there and we then we connect what is happening nationally to these groups, and I think it can be a very, very effective and cohesive system.
Well, I think one side of it is the businesses and entrepreneurship and what's coming up, and the other side of it is investment. So we kind of understood what the National People's Powers Plan is for Colombo when they come into power, and there are people who want to start businesses, and this is what we're going to do. How are you all planning on attracting investment? That's a different ministry, that's a different minister, that's a different aspect you all are supposed to work on. So is there a plan in place, right?
Sure. I think a lot of what we're looking at within the Colombo city itself, within whatever resources that we have within the CMC also, are things that can be better utilized. So I know this is digressing from investment per se, but for us it is really crucial to also be able to analyze and perhaps reanalyze how we can move forward, in particular in increasing our revenue, right? As a CMC, a lot of things have been underutilized, a lot of things haven't been used in the way in which it can be, and for us I think a lot of value addition will help in just being a lot of things have just been left as is, and there's been very little. To be honest, we haven't moved forward with a lot of things. We're just running as is, right? So I think with the CMC, Mariam, it will be very critical for us to have, I think, maybe a proper financial analysis on it to be able to figure out how we want to move forward with it.
Right. So before we wrap up, I'd like to shoot this final question at you. When I started off, I said next week, this time, people would know who exactly they're voting for. But today, we might have a few here and there who are still not sure, who they're voting for. Or there might be a handful of people, like you said, who have thought, okay, I'm exhausted. I voted for the 2 previous elections. This time, I'm going to take a break. But that might not quite be favorable for the country. So you tell us, Vraie, as someone who's contesting for this place, who is a people's representative, who could potentially be Colombo's mayor, why should the people vote for you? Why are you the best person to do this job?
I'm the best person to do this job because I have the best team. I have the most able team, a team that is caring, that is efficient, that puts the people of this city first. And I think that is something that has historically never happened. We've never put the people of the city first. And I mean all of its people, not just one category of people. But everyone in the city deserves dignity. Everyone of the city in the city deserves joy and prosperity. And this is something that we want for the people. We understand that people have placed an enormous amount of trust in us, and this is something that we want to take forward. I am going to say this, that the work of the city isn't going to be left alone to those in the CMC alone. Isn't going to be left alone to those who are going to be the people's representatives. We need to work with the people of the city in order to resolve the problems of the city. We've been very open about it. We've been very, I think, very pushy about it also, saying continue to engage with us. We will win, but beyond that, in order to resolve people's problems, engage with us. We'll figure out if we want to do something, prioritize. Is this something we're going to do within our first budget? Is this something we're going to do with our second budget? How are we going to make this work best for our low-income settlement or for our high-rise building, whatever it is, or for our apartment, for our flat? And I think those are conversations we need to have going forward. Conversations are often what politicians don't have with people, and I think that is critical and crucial. So we are going to try to find better ways to communicate with people. What we are offering is not something that's based on a race card. That's not something that's based on ethnicity. We're not talking about political legacy. We are talking about a group of extremely able people who have come from within the city, who have come from within, within the communities that within your neighborhoods, within the spaces that you also, are a part of. And I think this is the opportunity that, people had for a very long time. People wanted a citizen-centric government. And I think this is exactly what we're offering. Local government is extremely important. We want people to take it seriously. This is your first engagement. This is the place that will affect your home, your community. So please do take it seriously. Go out there and vote.
Right, and that was our conversation with Colombo mayoral candidate of the National People's Power, Vraie Balthazaar. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you again with yet another face-to-face, same time, same place. See you tomorrow.
Newsfirst, face to face with Mariam Gunvujaya.